Skarloey, the little engine, loves all the sights and sounds along his line and knows them very well. One morning, soon after he returned from being mended, he was enjoying his journey more than ever before. Along the way, he met Rusty. "You know," he said, "if I couldn't see these familiar faces and places, I'd think I was on a different railway. You've done wonders with these rails." Rusty laughed. "I'm glad you're pleased. Manager said let's mend the track so well he won't know where he is. And we did. And you didn't, if you take my meaning." Skarloey liked this hard-working diesel. "There's still one bad bit," warned Rusty. "Just before the first station, an engine might come off there, particularly Duncan. He will rock and roll along the line. Look at him right now. I shouldn't like his passengers hurt." "Quit about me. I'm a plain-speaking engine and I believe in plain speaking. Speak up." Rusty warned Duncan about the bad bit of line. "Huh," grunted Duncan. "I know my way about. I don't need smelly diesels to tell me what to do." Rusty felt hurt. Duncan banged about the yard. Then he clattered crossly to the station. James was already there, waiting for him. "You're late," he snapped. "I know," said Duncan. "It's that smelly diesel's fault. Rusty tries to teach me how to stay on the rails and then goes off leaving me to find my own coaches." "You poor engine," sympathised James. "I know all about diesels. One crept into our yard and ordered us about. I soon sent him packing." Duncan was filled with admiration. He didn't know that James was boastful and sometimes didn't tell the truth. "Send Rusty packing, send Rusty packing," snorted Duncan. He climbed the hill furiously. "Well done, boy. Keep it up," encouraged his driver. Soon they were near the first station. Duncan was pleased. Nothing's happened, silly old diesel. Clever me." And he rocked and he rolled along the line. "Steady, boy," checked his driver, but it was too late. "Sleepers and ballast. I'm off." And he was. "I warned him," said Rusty, "but all he did was call me names." The little diesel refused to move. "I'm ashamed of you, Rusty," said Skarloey. "Think of the passengers. What are they going to do?" "Oh, I'd forgotten them. Yes, of course. We must help the passengers." And Rusty roared into life. Duncan stood sad and solitary. He couldn't rock and roll now. "Oh, dear," he thought. "Everyone will know how silly I am." The passengers had to get out and help too. They weren't very pleased about that, but worked as hard as they could. They carefully levered Duncan back onto the line. After that, Duncan was extra careful all day. At last, evening came. "Rusty," he whispered, "thank you for helping. I'm sorry I was rude to you." "That's all right, Duncan. I wish all diesels were like you. Let's be friends." "Suits me," replied Rusty. "We'll mend that bad bit of rail first thing tomorrow." One winter's night, when the cold wind blew, the engines found it hard to sleep. "What we need," suggested Toby, "is to listen to a story." "A mysterious story," said Percy. "But," added Duck, "it must have a happy ending." "Driver told me a story," said Thomas. So everyone listened. "Once upon a time," began Thomas, There were 3 little engines who lived in their own little shed on their own little railway. Their names were Duke, Stuart and Falcon. Duke was the oldest and named after His Grace the Duke of Sodor. He was proud of this and loved to keep the little engines in order. Whenever they did anything that Duke thought wrong, he would say, "That would never suit His Grace." Other engines came and went, but Duke outlasted them all. Stuart and Falcon used to call him Grandpuff. They were fond of him, but they got very tired of hearing all about His Grace. Sometimes they would tease him and chant, "Engines come, engines go, Grandpuff goes on forever." "You impertinent scallywags," Duke would say. "Whatever are you engines coming to?" "Never mind, Grandpuff, we're only young ones." "Well, you'd better mind, unless you want to end up like Smudger." "Oh, Grandpuff, whatever happened?" "Smudger," said Duke, "was a show-off. He rode roughly and often came off the rails. I warned him to be careful, but he took no notice." "Listen, Dookie, who worries about a few spills?" "We do here," I said, but Smudger just laughed. Until one day, manager said he was going to make him useful at last. Smudger stopped laughing then. "Why? What did he do?" "He turned him into a generator. He's still there behind our shed. He'll never move again." After that, Stuart and Falcon became really useful engines, and all 3 were happy together for many years. Then, hard times came. The mines in the hills closed. And the railway was closed too. People came to buy the engines. "We'll take Stuart and Falcon." No one wanted Duke. They thought him too old. "Cheer up, Grandpuff," called Stuart. "We'll find you a nice railway, and then you can come and keep us in order." They tried to be brave and cheerful, but no one really thought their dreams would come true. Duke's driver and fireman oiled and greased him one last time. They sheeted him snugly and said goodbye. They had to go away and find work. Duke was alone. "Oh well," he sighed, "I'll go to sleep. It'll help pass the time." Winter torrents washed soils from the hills. Trees and bushes grew all around. You wouldn't have known a shed was there, let alone a little engine asleep inside. "That's not a happy ending," exclaimed Percy. "Ah," murmured Thomas sleepily, "there will be, but that'll have to wait until next time." It was a beautiful moonlit night on the Island of Sodor. The day's work was done and all the engines puffed safely home. "Thomas," whispered Percy, "will you tell us the end of the story?" "You mean the one about Duke, the lost engine?" "Exactly," said Henry. "But," added James, "please remind us of the story so far." So Thomas began, and here is the rest of the story he told. Duke was old and lived with 2 young engines called Stuart and Falcon. They teased Duke and called him Grandpuff, but they were happy together. Then, their line was closed down and the young engines went away. Duke was left alone in the shed. He went to sleep, and everything around him changed. But Duke was never forgotten. Years went by, until one day not long ago, visitors came to see the Fat Controller. "We want to find Duke," they said, "and make him happy again." Maps lay everywhere. "If we follow the old line shown here on the map," they said, "we'll travel north of the village and then into the mountains. And look, there's a sign for the old station. If Duke's anywhere, he's there." Everyone set off to the mountains far away. The days went by and the search grew harder, but the rescuers wouldn't give up. "Let's go this way," they said. But there was still no sign of Duke. "He's here somewhere," they said. They scrambled over hills and struggled over ditches. At last, their search ended. Quite by accident. "We found him! We found our sleeping beauty!" "Excuse me," inquired Duke. "Are you a vandal? Driver told me vandals break and smash things." "Bless you, no," laughed the rescuers. "We've dropped in because we couldn't find your door. Falcon and Stuart will be pleased to see you." "So they did remember," sighed Duke happily. Then they all set off to Duke's new home. Stuart and Falcon were ready with a big welcome. "He's here," they whispered. "Shh, shh." "You woke me up," grumbled Duke. "In my young days, engines were seen and not heard, Grandpuff, we know. We'll all be back to work tomorrow. We're glad you've come back. We can keep you in order now." "Keep me in order? Be off with you." "Impudent scallywags," murmured Duke. But his old eyes twinkled, and for the first time in years he smiled as he dozed in the sun. "And that," said Thomas, "is the whole story. Did you like it?" "Yes, indeed," agreed the engines, "especially the happy ending." And soon they were all asleep too. One morning, Percy was impatient. He was wearing a new coat of paint and longed for everyone to see it. The other engines were still dozing, but not Percy. "Driver should be here by now. What's he doing?" "Sleeping," grunted Gordon. "But that means I'll be late. The coaches will be waiting and the passengers will get cross." "Rubbish," huffed Henry. "It's still early," added James. "You just want to show off." "No, I don't." "Never mind, Percy," said Thomas. "It'll soon be time for work. But be careful or you might run into danger. And Duke is not here to save you." "Duke?" stuttered Toby. "You mean our hero?" A large painting of Duke hung in the engine shed. "The very same," said Thomas. "Driver told me the story. Listen." And this is the story Thomas told them. Long ago, when Peter Sam was still called Stuart and Sir Handel Falcon, they worked with Duke on his old railway. But Falcon still had a lot to learn. The manager came to see him. "Falcon, I'm pleased with your work so far. Now you must learn a difficult part of the line. We call it the Mountain Road." Falcon was excited. "Yes, please, sir." "So tomorrow," continued the manager, "when you have a new coat of paint, you will go on it. Duke, will explain everything. Huh, thought Falcon. Duke's an old fusspot. The next day came. Listen, warned Duke, the mountain road is difficult. I'll lead. No, replied Falcon, I'll lead. How can I learn the route with you lumbering ahead and blocking the view? Suit yourself, said Duke. But never mind the view, look at the track. The engines set off. Look at the track, puffed Duke. Never mind the view. Fusspot, fusspot, replied Falcon. Fuddy-duddy, fuddy-duddy, fuddy-duddy. The engine's speed grew slower and slower. Don't dawdle, urged Falcon. No hurry, puffed Duke. Soon they approached a tunnel. Falcon didn't like the tunnel. It was curved and he couldn't see. I want to get out, he sighed. One moment everything seemed safe, then suddenly... Falcon was derailed and hung dangerously over the edge. Duke bravely held on with all his strength. Stop shaking, he called. I can't hold you if you shake. Duke's driver and fireman worked quickly to make the two engines safe again. Then came more trouble. Water, cried Duke's fireman. Duke needs water, quickly! Luckily, there was a workman's cottage nearby. Soon, everyone was passing jugs, buckets, kettles and saucepans filled with water until Duke's thirst was quenched. All the while, Duke was building more strength. At last, with everyone's help, he was able to pull Falcon back onto the rails. Then, they started off once more. The manager was waiting at the top station. He apologised for the accident. Your Duke, said the passengers, is a hero. He stood firm like a bulldog and wouldn't let go. Falcon was grateful too. Thank you for saving me, Duke. I don't know why you bothered after I'd been so rude. Oh well, replied Duke. You just had a new coat of paint. It would have been a pity if you'd have rolled down the mountain and spoilt it. Duke is the hero of all the engines. This is a story about him. It happened long ago when Peter Sam was called Stuart and Sir Handel Falcon. Many people came year after year to see the mountains and the lakes, and most of all, Duke. He always pulled his train, even on days when he didn't feel well. I mustn't disappoint my friends, he would say. Every morning he took his passengers up the line and stopped anywhere they wanted. Beep, beep, he whistled. Please be ready when I come back for you, otherwise we might miss your boat to the mainland and that would never do. One day, Duke didn't feel well. He was short of steam and glad of a rest. His driver and fireman had just finished clearing his tubes when Stuart bustled in. Hello, Grandpuff, he teased. Are you short of puff? Nothing of the sort. This is routine maintenance. Tell you what, went on Stuart. You're getting old. We must take care of you in case you break down. Humph, boosted Duke. That'll be the day. Duke couldn't stay cross for long. It was a lovely evening. Couldn't be better, he chanted happily. began to climb, but Duke didn't mind. "I've plenty of steam," he puffed. "We'll be up in a couple of puffs." But soon, Duke's puffs changed to wheezes. His valves were leaking steam. "It's not so easy, it's not so easy," he croaked. "But I'll manage." At last they reached the station. Duke's driver examined him carefully. Anxious passengers waited for news. "Duke is going to take you to the harbour, but he might be late," said the guard. "So 2 engines are coming to help. You'll still catch your boat." Falcon buffered up in front. "Poor old Grandpuff, what a shame you've broken down." "Peep, peep, pip," teased Stuart. "This is the day." He was coupled on behind. "Are you ready?" whistled Falcon. "Yes, I am," replied Stuart. And away they went. When they reached the next station, the cavalcade split up. Falcon took Duke's passengers to the boat. Stuart headed Falcon's train with Duke coupled behind. "Fancy me rescuing Grandpuff! This is the day, this is the day," he boasted. "Poor old engine, poor old engine." But Duke still had plenty of steam left in him. His valves sounded worse than they were. He and his driver had their own little joke ready. They waited until they reached the hill. "Now," said his driver. Duke puffed and roared as though he was pushing the whole train's weight before him. The noise echoed everywhere. When they reached the last station, everyone cheered. "What happened?" asked the boy. "They don't usually need 2 engines." "Well," replied his father, "Stuart broke down. Duke had to help him." Sounds as if he had a hard job too. Duke and his driver's joke had worked. "Fiddlesticks!" exclaimed Stuart, and he vanished in a cloud of steam. Duke wheezed alongside. "Poor old engine," he teased. "It's no good, Stuart. You can't win." If you should visit a place that has a lake in the woods and a beautiful waterfall, then you may also find 2 little engines called Skarloey and Rheneas. The engines know everybody and everybody knows them. There are 2 more engines, Sir Handel and Peter Sam. They used to be called Stuart and Falcon, but they liked their new names better. One day, the fat controller sent Edward to the works to be mended. A big surprise awaited Edward. It's Skarloey. What's he doing here? Skarloey was pleased to see Edward. "I've been sent here for a rest," he sighed. "I was put in this shed so that I could see everything and not be lonely. But I do miss Rheneas. He's going to be mended. I wish I could be mended too and pull coaches again." Just then, some workmen arrived. "We're going to take you to the works now, Edward. Come along." "Goodbye, Skarloey. Your railway is a lovely line." "Oh, it is, it is. You've cheered me up, Edward. Goodbye." Meanwhile, Sir Handel was having trouble with some coaches. He tried to be kind, but the coaches didn't trust him. They were awkward and rude. There was worse to come. Some careless sheep had strayed onto the line. "He's bumped us!" screamed the coaches. "Let's pay him out!" They surged into Sir Handel and pushed him off the rails. No one was hurt, but Sir Handel limped sadly to the shed. "No more work for you today," said his driver. "How are we going to pull the visitors' train without an engine?" "What about me, sir?" "Skarloey, can you do it?" "I'll try," said the old engine. The coaches stood at the platform.
I'm ashamed of you, scolded Skarloey. You might have hurt your passengers. The coaches quivered.
We're sorry, Skarloey. The guard blew the whistle, and their journey began. Skarloey remembered all the gates and stiles where he had to stop. The sun shone, the rails were dry. This is lovely, sang Skarloey. Presently the line grew steep. Skarloey felt short of steam. Take your time, soothed his driver. It'll be better downhill, Skarloey said to himself. But it wasn't. His springs were weak and the rail joints jarred his wheels. At last, a spring gave way. I feel all crooked, cried Skarloey. We'll need a bus now for our passengers, sighed his driver. No, pleaded Skarloey. I'll get them to the station or burst. James was waiting at the platform. Clanging and clanking, Skarloey steamed in. I'll do it! I'll do it! I've done it. James collected his passengers and respectfully puffed away. Everyone was pleased with Skarloey, but he was still worried. Old engines can't pull trains like the young ones can. They can if they're mended, Old Faithful, smiled his driver. And that's what's going to happen to you. You deserve it. Skarloey and Rheneas work on the railway that weaves round the lakes and mountainsides. The coaches are filled with visitors and the engines are proud to run the line come rain or shine. The engines will never let their passengers down, but they are old and tire more easily. Their drivers understood this, and they spoke kindly to them. There's more than enough work for you both on this railway. The manager is sending 2 more engines to help us run the line. Skarloey and Rheneas were pleased with this news and promised to give the new engines a big welcome. When Sir Handel and Peter Sam arrived, they found they had much to learn. What a small shed, grunted Sir Handel. This won't do at all. We're much too smart for this old shack. I think it's nice, said Peter Sam. Huh, replied Sir Handel. What's that rubbish? Shh, said Peter Sam. That's Skarloey. He's famous. And he whispered to Skarloey. I'm sorry, Skarloey. Sir Handel's upset now, but he's quite nice, really. Skarloey felt sorry for Peter Sam. Now, Sir Handel, said the fireman, I will get you ready for work. I'm tired. Let Peter Sam go. He'd love it. No, you're first. Sir Handel puffed away to fetch his coaches. He didn't like the look of them at all. Whatever next? Those aren't coaches, they're cattle trucks. Ooh! Screamed the coaches. What a horrid engine. It's not what I'm used to, clanked Sir Handel. He rolled to the platform just as Gordon arrived. Hello, who are you? I'm Gordon. Who are you? I'm Sir Handel. I've heard of you. You're an express engine. So am I, but I'm used to smart coaches, not these cattle trucks. Do you have smart coaches? I see you do. We must have a chat. Sorry, I can't stop. We must keep time, you know. Gordon was speechless. Clouds of steam filled the air as Sir Handel huffed and puffed along the line. He was still cross when they reached the top station. Sir Handel was hoping for a rest, but his driver thought otherwise. "We'll leave the coaches now and fetch some trucks from the quarry." "Trucks!" snorted Sir Handel. "Trucks! I won't, so there!" Sir Handel was about to cause a great deal of trouble. "Told you," said Sir Handel. By the time the workmen came to rescue him, Sir Handel was feeling rather silly. To make matters worse, there stood the Fat Controller. His message to Sir Handel was brief and blunt. "I shall talk to you later." Then he and the fireman left with Peter Sam. Sir Handel felt sillier still. "Come on," said his driver. "Let's get you back on the rails." When Sir Handel crawled home, he found the Fat Controller waiting for him. "You're a very naughty engine. I hope I can trust you to behave when you next come out of this shed." After hearing that, I'm sure Sir Handel will, aren't you? Sir Handel had been naughty, so the Fat Controller made him stay in the shed for a while. Peter Sam was now busier than ever. He had to do Sir Handel's work as well as his own. He was very excited, and the fireman found him hard to handle. "Anyone would think that he wanted to work," said Sir Handel, who was lonely and bored. "All respectable engines do," replied Skarloey. "Keep calm, Peter Sam, and you'll do well." But Peter Sam was in such a state that he couldn't listen. He collected some coaches and went on his way. But somehow the faster he wanted to go, the slower the journey became. When Peter Sam finally fussed into the station, Henry was already there. "This won't do, youngster," said Henry. "I can't be kept waiting. If you are late tonight, I'll go off and leave your passengers behind." "Pah," said Peter Sam. Secretly, he was a little worried, but not for long. The guard blew his whistle and waved his green flag. Peter Sam puffed happily away, singing a little song. "I'm Peter Sam, I'm running this line. I'm Peter Sam, I'm running this line." What fun it all is, he thought, as he journeyed along the line. The coaches enjoyed themselves too. They were growing fond of Peter Sam. Every afternoon they had to wait an hour at the station by the lake. The station has a little shop selling refreshments. The driver, fireman and the guard buy tea and cakes from the refreshment lady. At last, the waiting was over, and Peter Sam was sizzling with impatience. "Beep! Hurry up, please!" he whistled to the passengers. How awful, he thought, if we miss Henry's train. The guard was ready with his flag and whistle. The refreshment lady was making her way to the train. Then it happened. The guard says that Peter Sam was too impatient. Peter Sam says he was sure he heard a whistle. Anyway, he started. "Stop, stop, stop!" wailed the coaches. "You've left the refreshment lady behind." "Bother!" groaned Peter Sam. "We're sure to miss Henry now." The refreshment lady climbed aboard and they started again. Peter Sam didn't sing anymore. Instead,
He hurried along the line as fast as his wheels and his driver would let him.
they arrived at the big station just in time. "Hooray!" said Peter Sam. He felt very relieved. "Not bad, youngster," said Henry loftily.
But the refreshment lady was still cross. "What do you mean by leaving me behind?"
"I'm sorry, refreshment lady," replied Peter Sam, "but Henry said he might leave without us." Then the refreshment lady laughed.
"You silly engine, Henry was teasing you. He wouldn't have gone without our passengers. He's a guaranteed connection." "Well," said Peter Sam, "where's that Henry?"
But Henry had chortled away. Every day where the little engines work, the crisp air is suddenly filled with a familiar noise. The lakes and mountains have many visitors, and Harold the helicopter flies the sky making sure that no one is in trouble.
All present and correct. Time to return to base.
Then Harold noticed something. A sturdy diesel was coming round the mountainside. Harold flew lower for a closer inspection.
"I'm Harold. Who are you?"
"I'm Rusty," replied the diesel.
"Don't recall seeing you before. What brings you this way?"
"The Fat Controller sent me to help the other engines," huffed Rusty. This was no time for a chat with a helicopter.
"Well done. Cheers and keep up the good work."
"Cheeky chopper," muttered Rusty. "Not long now," encouraged the driver. "We'll soon be at the top station." Peter Sam and Sir Handel were glad to see Rusty. Even so, Sir Handel wouldn't stop grumbling. The trucks didn't like Sir Handel and wanted to play tricks on him. "No one understands our feelings," sympathised Gordon. "Now, if you were ill, you couldn't shun trucks, could you?"
"Good idea," replied Sir Handel. "I'll try it."
He did so next morning. "I don't feel well," he groaned. There wasn't time to examine him, so some of his trucks were coupled behind Peter Sam's coaches. Rusty promised to follow with the rest. Peter Sam didn't mind the extra work. He left his coaches at the station and trundled cheerfully on. Soon they reached the quarry where the trucks were needed. Empty trucks at the bottom of the slope are hitched to a steel rope. Loaded ones at the top are hitched to another. By their weight, loaded trucks run down the steep slope, pulling the empty ones up. Peter Sam duly waited at the bottom of the slope for the loaded trucks. He never bumped trucks unless they misbehaved. But the loaded trucks couldn't see him properly. They thought he was Sir Handel. The chance for trickery had come. "Faster! Faster!" they yelled. "No, no!" wailed the empty trucks. "It's Peter Sam!" But it was no use. "Hurrah! Hurrah!" roared the trucks. Peter Sam shut his eyes. "Beep, beep," wailed Peter Sam. Rusty was working nearby and came to help clear up the mess. "Bust my buffers," exclaimed Rusty. "Never mind, Peter Sam, we'll get you out." Peter Sam felt battered. His funnel was cracked and his boiler dented. "Thank you, Rusty," he sighed and limped slowly home. "I'm sorry about your accident," said Sir Handel. "I always stand well back. Trucks don't like me." Why didn't you warn me? I didn't think.
You never do. You can start thinking now while you're doing Peter Sam's work as well as your own. That'll teach you to pretend you are ill.
Sir Handel did start thinking about Gordon. When the wreckage was cleared away, Rusty set off along the line.
Splendid to see you again, whizzed Harold. I'm completing my evening's lookabout.
Well done, replied Rusty. Keep up the good work.
And the little diesel purred back home.
Skarloey had been to the works to be mended. He felt much better. Rusty the diesel was helping him off his truck. Skarloey hadn't met the little diesel before. Rusty seems a kindly sort of engine, he thought to himself. I help to mend the line and do odd jobs, explained Rusty. I hear everyone is looking forward to seeing you again. Come on. Peter Sam was feeling depressed. He was still getting over his accident, but he wanted to start work again. The Fat Controller wouldn't let him. Another day's rest will do you good, he said. Besides, I've got a surprise for you. For me, sir? How nice, sir. What is it, sir? Wait and see. The surprise was Skarloey. Oh, said Peter Sam, I'm glad you've come home. They lit Skarloey's fire and he sizzled happily. I feel all excited, he said, just like a young engine. Now, tell me all the news. I see you've met Rusty, said Peter Sam. Yes, I like that diesel. So do I, replied Peter Sam. It's a pity Duncan doesn't. Who is Duncan? He came as a spare engine after my accident, replied Peter Sam. Is he useful? He keeps busy and I'm sure he means well, but he's bouncy and rude. He sings and sways and swivels around. His driver calls it rock and roll. I understand, said Skarloey gravely. His driver interrupted. Duncan has done it again. He's stuck in a tunnel. Come on, old boy. We'll have to get him out. Skarloey was pleased. He wanted to run and looked forward to meeting Duncan. They found the guard's van and some workmen and hurried up the line. How nice and smooth the rails are, thought Skarloey. They've mended all the old bumps. The little diesel helped do that. What a difference Rusty's made to the line. Quite soon they found Duncan. He was stuck at the far end of the tunnel, and he was very cross. I'm a plain blunt engine, as speak as I find. Tunnels should be tunnels and not rabbit holes. This railway is no good at all. Don't be silly, snapped his driver. This tunnel is quite big enough for engines who don't rock and roll. It took some while to clear away the rocks and set Duncan free again. At last, Skarloey was able to push Duncan and his coaches safely through. The guard's van was left on the siding, and the workmen stayed to make sure everything was safe. Duncan grumbled all the way home, but Skarloey paid no attention. Later, the Fat Controller spoke severely to Duncan. Listen to me. There is nothing wrong with that tunnel. You stuck in it because you tried to do rock and roll. Tunnels are not dance floors, and you are not a pop star. The Fat Controller gave his full attention to Duncan's funnel. If it happens again, he ended ominously, I shall find ways to cut you down to size. In other words, your career is on the line. Need I say more? Duncan thought the Fat Controller had said quite enough, and he remained completely silent and still for at least a whole evening.